welcome back to Watch More Movies. I am your host, Ricky, and continuing the theme today of spooky season, we are going to be talking about found footage horror movies. Found footage horror is a real 50-50 for me. It can be effective use of the gimmick and put you in the main character's POV, while sometimes it is also used for cheap jump scares and just throwing things at the wall and at the screen that aren't really scary or just downright silly and kind of lazy. If you're already into horror and the found footage style, you may have already seen some of these movies, but if you aren't, or you want to kind of open up your past experiences to better ones with some of these recommendations, I do hope that these change your perception if you give them a shot. So here we go. Since there are going to be more than just 5 recommendations, I am going to be going through them at a quicker pace, but nothing that won't convey how much I do like these movies. So the first one is going to be As Above, So Below. 2014's As Above, So Below follows a crew in search of an ancient artifact in the tombs underneath Paris, France. This is one that absolutely gets me every time I've seen it. It doesn't necessarily reinvent the subgenre of found footage horror, but it's incredibly effective at doing so. You care about the characters enough to invest in them, and as they start to descend lower and lower into these catacombs, you don't know if they're actually going in deeper just to find this artifact in ancient ruins, or if they're diving into hell. That aspect is really cool and really well done. It isn't a metaphor, although it kind of is, but you actually feel as if you are in literal hell with them, and feel more and more pressure under the surface of Earth, as you're also digging into these characters and their pasts and what their own personal hells are. Many of the found footage horror films, at least more well-known ones, are set in haunted houses or hospitals or the like, but the setting here with history tying to it is so interesting to me and fun that it's a modern favorite of mine. Next is 2015's The Visit, directed by M. Night Shyamalan. This is one that is not necessarily the epitome of found footage horror, and it's not for everyone, but I would recommend it due to the uniqueness of it. This was his first film after his massive misfires of Lady in the Water, The Happening, The Last Airbender, and then After Earth. With The Visit, M. Night Shyamalan funded it himself and went back to his horror basics. It follows a brother and sister who travel to visit their grandparents while their mother's on vacation with her boyfriend. Now, what makes this feel so eerie is the unexpected nature of their circumstances. There isn't a large brooding man haunting them or some creature or demon, but it is their grandparents who are not inherently scary, but there's something wrong with them to begin with, and you don't know quite what it is as you're watching it. And as a child, not knowing what to do in that kind of situation, in their POV, it is definitely scary because you just don't know what's going on. There are definitely jump scares galore, but in our main character's point of view, they make sense and are unexpected due to the sort of silly and abnormal nature of crazy grandparents sort of scaring and terrifying you. This was a fun one to see, and M. Night get back to his horror roots. I really have mostly enjoyed his films after this one, especially Split and Trap if you haven't seen those yet, but The Visit, I highly recommend it. The third recommendation is 2014's Unfriended. This was an unexpected hit and experiment. It came out of nowhere and was a lot better than personally I expected. Taking place entirely through a large group call on Skype, this follows a group of friends talking about everyday high school stuff until an unknown user enters the call and no one's able to kick them out. This sets off a night of torture and terror amongst these high schoolers, and I love this movie. I remember it being mixed on reception when it came out. Perhaps the style of filmmaking did not help, but I feel I have defended it since and seeing people come around to it, which has just been great. Not once do you ever deviate from the characters on the computer screen, even in instances where they attempt to walk out of their house or around their house to try and evade this mysterious presence. It doesn't blow the door off practical effects or tension, but it never attempts to. It uses this filmmaking style effectively and really invests you in how these characters tie into who this person is or entity is and why it's happening, which doesn't always happen in these kinds of movies, even standard found footage horror movies. Usually ends up being just some dead person come back to haunt random people who stepped foot in the wrong place they have no connections to. I really recommend this one, and I will the sequel as well, which is next. It is 2018's Unfriended Dark Web. Now, this personally to me is a really good sequel to a very gimmicky original, which obviously I still do like a lot. But there's an interesting angle they take to this one. This one follows a group of friends who find a laptop at a local cafe and on Skype start to look into it, find out what's on it, hack into it, what have you. Soon they discover that they are being watched on their call by the people who own the laptop. As you can imagine, it's not supernatural but dives into the world of the dark web. Some things are shown, some things are just heavily implied, but that does not make it any less disturbing. What is a refreshing change of pace for this in contrast to the original is it doesn't take the supernatural element route. Some things may be a bit of a stretch, but it all takes place within the real world, seen and unseen, pockets of technology-based world that these messed up things do happen in real life and are happening. It creates an uneasy and unnerving feeling throughout, for me, at least me. The second it was over, I remember wanting to cover all my computer cameras. This was a really fun sequel. If you like the first one, definitely give this second one a shot. Next is another one of these on the computer screen films. This takes place during COVID lockdown. It is Host. Features a group of friends on their weekly Zoom call just to stay in touch throughout the pandemic. Very, very briefly in this movie because there isn't really much to say that's much different from the first Unfriended. When one of these friends suggests that they bring in a medium to conduct a seance, no one takes it seriously. That's kind of like the difference in plot, I guess, but the general gist and vibe. This was a big hit during COVID, I remember, at least very notable. It's just under an hour long at 56 minutes. Lots of great scares and very effective and easy to watch if you like this filmmaking style. There's not a ton inventive with this, but it does do the genre effectively. So, not really much to say about it because it's pretty similar to the first Unfriended. Just different friends, circumstance, plot, but I do recommend it still quite a bit. Alright, the next pair of recommendations is going to be an original and then the sequel. It is Creep 1 and then Creep 2. The Creep films are ones that I hold dear to me personally. I remember watching these and afterwards really diving into some of Mark Duplass's work and becoming a huge fan of his and what him and his brother were doing in their careers. Creep follows a videographer named Aaron who accepts a job out of desperation at a remote cabin in California. He meets the client Joseph, who explains that his brain cancer has left him with little time left and he's expected to die before his wife gives birth. So before he dies, he wants to create memories for his child in video form so the child can feel connected to him. This film is kind of sad and unsettling at the very same time to the nth degree. It is a classic creeped out in the cabin in the woods movie and also an examination of a lonely man and how that loneliness can be taken for the worse in somebody. I really do recommend this one. It's very low budget and you can kind of tell, but that's also the charm of it and the kind of lived in feel that you get when you watch it. Creep 2 is a little more produced, but not in any sort of high glossy way. Creep 2 follows the same Joseph character as he enters his mid-40s and has a midlife crisis. He hires a woman to film him for something. Honestly, I don't remember what the initial allure was, but then tells her that he is a serial killer and she can live if she makes a documentary of his life. Another distortion of the lonely man killer story, but told with a new perspective and this time entering a real life thing in the form of midlife crisis. Just as effective in the first and second Creep, Duplass as the killer is something terrifying and fun and charming and both of these movies are great cabin in the woods spooky season outings. I know there is a TV show that came out later. I have not watched it yet on Shudder. I do plan to. I hear it's great and I do love these films, so I do hope to check them out soon. I will check out the Creep tapes on Shudder. I'm not sponsored by them by mentioning them. They can if they like to, but I'm not. But I do recommend Creep 1 and 2. If not for nothing else, the cabin in the woods feel and Mark Duplass is a great, great killer. Alright, next is another first film in a franchise that I have not seen all of, to be honest, but it is Hell House LLC. Hell House LLC is one I saw a few years back that really, really took me by surprise. I knew very little, but knew there were a couple films in the series, but honestly just kind of wrote it off as a very cheap horror movie that, catches some people's attention and is made out to be a bigger thing than it is. gave it a shot anyway, and was absolutely delighted after watching it. Shot in the style of a documentary, this movie follows a group of people who are opening their own haunted house as they're preparing for the opening night of it. On opening night, 15 patrons were killed, and this film follows the lead up and what happened on that night. What I think this does so effectively for sometimes such a tired out style of horror is you get these long shots and aren't rapidly moving around constantly. There are these long, narrow walkways in cluttered basements or stairwells or just tiny rooms, and you see little things move or feel this tension that something is happening, and it's very, very unnerving. I do recommend this. There is some really cool killer effects, if I can say that without giving too much away, but it is very creepy, very scary. I do plan to watch the sequels probably soon, all of them back to back to back. So I know they just released one in theaters and it's coming to Shudder, so I believe they're all streaming on Shudder, but I do recommend all of these. If for nothing else, then it's the fact that it's very, very inventive. And check out Hell House LLC, and I will be checking out the rest with you guys as well. Continuing along with found footage horror films in a franchise that I have not seen all of, it is VHS 1 and VHS 2. The VHS franchise is such a cool one to me, and again, shamefully, I've only seen parts 1 and 2, but they're found footage horror films that each film contains a few shorts spliced in between. The first one is basically about a group of really scumbag young guys who get a job offer to break into someone's house to steal a VHS tape. As they're inside the house, they start to encounter weird things going on and watch the tapes to see what's on them in the hopes of reselling them for their own profit. I'll talk about two segments, one from each of them to be fair. The first one is the last segment from the first film called 10/31/98, directed by Radio Silence, who went on to direct Ready or Not, the upcoming sequel for that, Abigail, and the two newest Scream films. It's about a group of friends who get invited to a Halloween party but mistakenly show up at the wrong address. Once they go inside, they encounter strange things happening and people doing really weird shit. It is tense and has some really great scares throughout. It can also be very funny. I remember being very funny with the group of friends that go together to this party. The next segment is from the second movie called Safe Haven, following a camera crew documenting a mysterious cult in Indonesia called Paradise Gates. That's all I'm going to say about that. For the ones that have seen the VHS series, I know Safe Haven is also quoted as a lot of people's favorites, amongst their favorites for the segments. It is scary, chilling, and for me personally, cults are so fascinating and absolutely terrifying. Something about them feels so real and otherworldly, almost a middle ground between real life horror and actual supernatural, otherworldly horror. I will eventually watch the rest of the VHS films. Perhaps next Halloween I can watch all of them and talk about them. But for now, those two are great segments. In both films, all the segments are absolutely terrific and very chilling. So if you like, sort of an anthology series, I definitely recommend it if you want to get, pick and choose which segments and which stories you want to watch. For the last recommendation, and it is one that many people have already heard of or know of or probably have seen, to me it is the scariest found footage film to date, the epitome and sort of the one that is a grandfather of the subgenre. It is 1999's Blair Witch Project, in which we follow a documentary crew who go into the Appalachian Mountains near Maryland to investigate the legend of the Blair Witch. There is so much lore to the making and release of this film, and it's so fascinating. It was a film that didn't do any traditional marketing and was very secretive to the point that the actors didn't talk about it to anyone leading up to it. So when the opening text in the film came, people thought the footage discovered was actual footage of real people who discovered this Blair Witch, and this movie became a huge cultural phenomenon. Made for less than just $1 million, and it made close to $250 million. I never saw it in theaters. I was obviously way too young. I was only 5 when this came out. And I still have not seen it at any theater. Actually, I might have, but it was so long ago I don't remember. But I do remember vividly that I saw this for the first time when I just kind of heard about it, and I heard about the story, how people thought it was real, but not really much more than that. So I remember buying the Blu-ray for like $2, went on to play my old Xbox Blu-ray player at my house in my room, and just being absolutely chilled to the bone. Gimmick and outside factors of all that stuff aside, this does what the best found footage horror does. It does not rely on jump scares or pop-out factors. It takes the characters and messes with them psychologically to the point where the fear they have and the hopelessness they have is the real horror, not what you think is going to pop out at you. This film also does something so brilliant that it never shows you the witch. That might be a turnoff for a lot of audiences today, which is a shame, but for me, it works so well. You never see it, and it makes it that much more mythological and intangible. There was a sequel to this film that I have not watched. It was like the Blair Witch 2's Book of Shadows or something like that. I don't really plan to be honest, from what I've heard about it. But then in 2016, in the midst of studios doing the Lego sequels and reviving dead franchises, Adam Wingard made a direct sequel just called Blair Witch, where the younger brother of one of the main characters is making his own documentation trying to find his older sister who was lost in the original film. That one is definitely scary and has a lot more world building to it. Even though I know it isn't for everyone and not many people liked it, it was absolutely scary to me, and I really liked the building on it. That can be saved for another day, but if you've never seen Blair Witch Project and want to be terrified, and also all these films I've recommended today, I do recommend them highly, especially if you like that style. So I know some people it makes them queasy or dizzy. I totally get it. But if you don't mind it and you just want to kind of watch an easy watch for horror, these are all strong recommendations that you can just turn your brain off and be scared by. Thank you for tuning in today to watch found footage horror with me. Next week's episode is going to be a subgenre of horror that is personally a favorite of mine just because I grew up watching it, and I really do hope that I give some good recommendations, although I have a feeling that a lot of people will have seen the ones I recommend. I know that I am dying to talk about it. You can keep up to date with the show on Instagram at PodWatchMovies and on Bluesky at watchmoremovies.bsky.social. Please subscribe, Apple, Spotify, YouTube. The show's link tree is on Instagram and Bluesky, as well as the description of the podcast and YouTube video. It does help a lot. Check, like, and subscribe. And until next time, watch more movies.